So in the meantime, we have one more speaker here to talk about the tribal forestry challenges, opportunities, and partnerships interviews for the tribal forestry workforce development issue from Stephanie Gutierrez. Stephanie Gutierrez, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong. It's from the San Carlos Apache Tribe, is the Forest and Community Program Director at EcoTrust. She leads projects related to forestry and natural resource planning, education, and community outreach and engagement. Stephanie's most recent work taps into her lived and professional experience in working alongside tribes and indigenous communities to apply indigenous knowledge system frameworks to forest and natural resource planning that centers the community's values, needs, and goals. In 2020, she enjoys working with communities to bring vibrant storytelling about forest, foods, and fire to life through a variety of mediums, including videos and experimental field tours. Stephanie's work grounds itself in authentic relationships and accountability between organizations, tribes, and BIPOC, I have to remember the acronym, communities and organizations. Stephanie earned a Sustainable Forest Management Master of Forestry degree from Oregon State University, as well as degrees from Humboldt State University and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Please welcome Stephanie Gutierrez.
BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and People of Color Communities. Sorry, probably should have spelled that out. Dagote, she Stephanie Gutierrez Gonce, Arahikai San Carlos Apache. Hello, my name is Stephanie Gutierrez. I am San Carlos Apache first and foremost, and I'm the Forest and Community Program Director at EcoTrust. I'm here with you today to talk about a collaborative project around tribal forestry workforce development. And I want to thank you all for coming here. I want to thank the hosts for having us, and Will participated in the survey as well, or in these interviews. And I will try to leave a couple minutes for questions at the end, but I do know that we're all itching to go to lunch as well. And so, sorry, just before I start, actually, I just wanted to mention that there are slides in here that I'm going to be skipping through. I included them for your reference to provide a little bit of information about our organization, as well as certain key points, data, certain legislation, but I won't be covering it in the time that we have together today. I'm going to try to get to the fun stuff. But yeah, so since 1991, EcoTrust, it's a nonprofit environmental organization based in Portland, Oregon. We've partnered with tribes and Black, Indigenous, and People of Color communities, as well as small family forest landowners throughout our bioregion. Those blue dots that you're seeing on the screen there represent the locations of the communities that we've worked with. And I'm going to skip through here. First I'm going to kick off this presentation with a quick project overview. I know this probably isn't the first time that you've heard about this project for a number of you, but just kind of give you a little update as well as a snapshot into what the landscape is around tribal forestry workforce development today. And then I'm going to jump into the interview methods and themes. And then numbers 5 through 8 there are the 4 themes that I'll be talking about. And again, saving a couple minutes for Q&A. So this project, it started in 2018 with the Intertribal Timber Council, Affiliated Tribes and Northwest Indians Economic Development Corporation, United South and Eastern Tribes, and Heritage University at the Yakama Nation, as well as EcoTrust as project partners. There are 3 phases of this project. The first was a gap and opportunity assessment that was started in 2018, and it was completed in 2020. And then the second phase, which are the interviews that I'm presenting to you today, it was originally supposed to start in 2020. We put that on hold due to the pandemic, as well as the severe wildfire seasons that we've had recently. And so we just wanted to be mindful of adding one more thing to our already full, very full plates, especially for tribal forestry programs. What we did instead, though, was an online intergenerational mentorship programming, and I presented on that last year at ITC's annual symposium, so it is online. And that program, We have successfully graduated, I guess, 2 cohorts from the program. It was with Yakama Nation Tribal School high school students paired with Heritage University Native undergraduate students. Many of them were Yakama as well. And they researched different topics about forestry. So we relied heavily on Google satellite imagery, Google Maps, and we learned things from soil surveys all the way to different silviculture prescriptions, all online. So that's something that we're committed to continuing as well. And then phase 2, right, we just completed those interviews in January, and Jessica Douglas, who's back there, is also a EcoTrust staff member and participated and contributed to the completion of the interviews and also the analysis. This presentation is the first part of reporting out of our findings from our project, and you'll see more webinars, blog posts, social media resources available to you all coming this summer on the EcoTrust and our partner platforms too. The grant itself wraps up in September of 2022, but that doesn't mean necessarily, right, that we solved workforce and it's done. So we're committed to continuing this work. And the next couple slides are around just the status of next steps. So we're going to skip through those. And we're going to jump into the snapshot of tribal workforce. So in the interviews, a tribal forestry participant mentioned that tribal forestry workforce, it's not just isolated to tribal forestry programs. It's not just their responsibility. This is a tribal-wide issue. It's a tribal-wide workforce development issue. So with that, here are some key resources that were used to help frame the interview methods as well as our analysis. So the IFMAT 3 report, which is now almost a decade old, but we have that IFMAT 4 coming out. And so we found out in that report, right, that what we've known, that there's an aging workforce, it's an urgent issue, we need to address it. ITC Strategic Workforce Plan identified 4 pillars: communication, collaboration, recruitment, and mentorship as key strategies that they needed to address over the 4 years, and that's coming to a close now too. And then also the National Congress of American Indians Workforce Development Toolkit, as well as their policy brief. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. So just some quick numbers here. That middle number, 17.9%, that is the unemployment rate of American Indian and Alaska Natives over 16 who are eligible to work. So that is double the unemployment rate of the total population of the US. And then that number on the right, I wanted to call out because it highlights that 22% of Native Americans that are living in rural areas depend on the health and productivity of natural resources for subsistence and benefit. So that means that our management of our tribal forests directly impact the health and wellness of our communities. And I thought that that was like a good data point to call out the importance of workforce development. And then the last thing that I'll mention, which I'm sure we all know, but I think it's good to reiterate this, is that this is a trust responsibility. So our treaties established a trust responsibility between tribal nations and the federal government. And when the federal government, when things are not properly administered or supported, or they're not adequately or consistently funded, that's a breach in trust responsibility. So it's the federal government's duty to be able to provide this for us. And then the next couple slides, which you can review in the PowerPoint presentation later, just around key legislation and data. Things that we already know, we're doing more with less. And now on to the interview methods. So this is what we did and how we did it. So that initial survey back in 2019, it included 30 tribes that participated in the survey. It captured about 95% of the timber volume that's produced in Indian country. And that initial, I guess those tribes that participated in the survey informed our initial interview participant list. And so from there, how we got additional participants were that we asked a question based on, like who should we contact within your network? And they provided the recommendations. And then from there, that's how we curated our interview participants. We conducted a total number of 27 interviews, which shook out to about 1,215 minutes. And we interviewed tribal foresters and staff, different programs and enterprises related to tribal forestry, as well as tribal forestry educators and tribal forestry students. Our interviews focused on what tribal forestry workforce projects and programs exist, and sought to answer what are the key needs, resources, and gaps for success of these programs. Our 4 themes that I'll be talking about today, these are by no means the only things that came up in the interviews. It's just in the short time that I have to talk to you today. I'm focusing on leadership, education, partnership, and then dream programming. So on leadership, before we jump into the interview participants' responses, I wanted to ground us here in this particular article. So this is a study that was conducted with the Nez Perce tribe with these 3 authors, and they were looking at entry-level tribal forestry and fire management roles. And they identified general attitudes, or I like to call them qualities, that support job success. So these are, I guess they look like adjectives, but they're actual qualities that entry-level tribal forestry and fire management individuals need to have to succeed in their role. I honestly, I feel like it's a good reminder too to ground ourselves in, if we are asking this of our entry-level tribal forestry and fire management individuals, we need to be also asking ourselves, how am I being, trustworthy? How am I, facilitating, being dependable, being open-minded? How am I being a self-starter? So I think that these qualities can extend throughout the tribal forestry and the fire management entry, mid, and even senior level roles. The other piece that this particular study identified was future trends. So we're already probably pretty aware around climate change and the aging workforce, but these are particular trends that tribal forestry programs should be thinking about because they're going to change the way how we work in forestry and fire management as well. So we need to start planning for these now if we already haven't, and taking them into consideration. And so going back to those general attitudes or qualities, I think what that's really speaking to is this concept of soft skills. Soft skills is something that came up quite often in the tribal forestry interviews. And this is a direct quote from a tribal forestry workforce interview participant that said, when it comes to soft skills development with their young crews, or even crews of all ages in the villages, that part of it too is that the people running the program also need to train themselves to be more understanding. And so for me, what that really is speaking to how are we being more open-minded, right, as a general attitude? How am I supporting success? Right? And how am I supporting those soft skills development for my crew or my direct reports or my team? And here's a couple suggestions that interview participants recommended for how leaders can support those soft skills development. So the first is transparency. This particular participant provided a protocol packet as an example to increase transparency between the tribal forestry program leaders or the crew supervisor and the crew. That packet breaks down day-to-day activities and really sets the crew members up for success so that way they understand what their actual job duties are. So that may mean including some of those general attitudes into that protocol packet for that crew. That protocol packet, it's also like a contract, right? It's the setting of expectations. It's one step in the onboarding process and leads to the co-creation of goals. And so the co-creation of goals, what that could be is it's not a direct supervisor then telling a younger crew member what they need to do, how they need to do it, right? Because that could cause some tension there. So to help ease that tension in the co-creation of goals, what you can do is use the protocol packet to be able to open that door, to group set that goal, to really think about what is it that we want to do together? What is that goal that we're trying to achieve? As a supervisor, asking that crew member, what do you need to achieve that goal? And that also sets up the crew member to practice those soft skills of communication to communicate what they need And then it's also a way to be like, hey, I didn't tell you to do this goal. You set this goal for yourself, and it helps you check in with them a little bit more. And then these are 3 existing leadership or mentorship programs that came up quite frequently during our interview process. So the Ag Forestry Leadership Program, which is only open to Washington State residents, the ACES Professional Mentorship Program, and the TREES Program. And sorry, I'm realizing I don't have a timer. Is there a timer here? Just, okay, someone tell me when I'm like 10 minutes away, please. And I pulled this quote out here because you're probably like, I know I am like, where are we going to get the funding to do all of this? Right? And so this participant actually said, so let's not forget the resources that we currently have. And those resources are the people that have been in this field. There's people that are in this room right now who have that knowledge and experience and that expertise. And this one particular individual had spent 35 years in the field of tribal forestry. And so when we talk about mentorship, so mentoring with what we currently have, right, those resources as people, as mentors, the interview participant recommended that we carve out a manageable percentage of the time. So you as leaders are experts at what your capacity is. And maybe that's 2 hours a month. Maybe that's 1 hour a month. Maybe it's 1 hour a week. Determine what is manageable for you and dedicate that time to either those other 2 bullets there, reaching out, engaging with neighboring tribal colleges, being a mentor to a younger entry-level career professional, connecting with youth through K through 12 presentations, program collaborations, or natural resource related camps. And for mentees, it's not only on the mentor, right, to seek you out. As mentees, as entry-level or even mid-level career professionals, we need to be proactive in reaching out to those leaders with experience. So if you see someone who really inspires you or influences you, give them a call, send them an email. Be creative with how you use your time. Sometimes we do need the carpool time to vent to our friends. Other times, we should be more strategic in how we use that time and maybe use it to have a conversation with a mentor to learn something new. And so the other thing that the interview participant mentioned is that there are a lot of people out there who could be mentors, but maybe they don't think of themselves as mentors, and that they need to be proactive and give back. And that's one of the main challenges that may be sometimes overlooked. So I think that there's a lot of mentors in this room. Even as an entry-level career professional, or maybe you're new in your career, one of those future trends was technology. Maybe you're more savvy with technology than what your mentor is. So setting aside that time as to maybe scaffold some of those technology skills for people who have been in this field for quite some time. And so going back to those existing leadership programs that were mentioned, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So when we're crafting leadership programs and developing new ones in the future for us in tribal forestry, we need to be thinking about building in these particular aspects to the programs. So one of the things that came up quite often in the interviews is that oftentimes either entering this program or completing the program is a barrier because of competing priorities and family emergencies and other crises. So having wraparound services, collaborating with your HR department or other experts within your community to provide mental health support, peer support, housing, transportation, stipends, those types of things, if we think about them ahead while developing the program, it'll help contribute to the success of the participants finishing the program. The other thing that I'll mention is don't forget to take care of yourself. So really build your own toolkit out. So as a tribal forestry leader, you may be an expert in tribal forestry, but you also have to be able to do all these other things to support your team. So just remember to take time to think about how can you build out that toolkit as well. There's a lot that's asked of you all. Thanks for that. And this is an example of stipends. So in this particular participants program, they utilize stipends to help the participants pay for their gear as well as any work clothing, childcare, housing, transportation, to just ensure the success of their students in their program. And it also represented commitment. And so this stipend, it was a form of commitment between the program and the participant, and then the participant's commitment to the particular program. Some last support services that are equally as important here is including families as much as possible. So building a more traditional community setting in these leadership training programs or even mentorship programs. Again, this particular example, it was from another participant who mentioned that they actually put families up in hotels so that way the participant could attend the training to have children involved as much as possible. And then when there were training burns, when they needed to have no children there, just for safety reasons, they had childcare on hand, but because they had already built in and considered that family is important to the success of these programs, they actually didn't need to pay additional funding for the childcare. And then, so some challenges also that came up were around adjusting to Western workspaces. So acknowledging the difficulty in navigating traditional subsistence lifeways and the cash economy that we're living in. And also the consistency in leadership program. It needs to be, I guess we need to improve so the leadership program, it needs to have a good reputation, and also needs to be represented well. To do that though, we need reliable funding and also the support, we need reliable funding and able to do that. So without that funding source, we aren't going to have that consistency to build up that reputation and the representation that's needed. This next theme is around education. So this theme, I took some time to really look at what tribal forestry students are asking, what they're grappling with, what is working well for them. And so ITC's strategic workforce plan mentions recruitment as one of its strategic pillars. And I thought that highlighting the diversity of forestry careers would be a good recruitment strategy. So increasing that awareness of the different career pathways and opportunities that are available to tribal forestry professionals. This particular participant mentioned that there was perhaps a stigma around forestry, in particular in the Northwest. And so really elevating those examples where it's showing that forestry is so much more than that, especially tribal forestry in general. As far as experiences for tribal natural resource students, we are much more diverse than your typical population. Many of us, don't have traditional or Western traditional academia pathways, so meaning going from high school to a four-year college to an entry-level career. Sometimes there may be, we take a couple years off. We also have higher rates of different types of crises that are really impacting our communities, and so we have that we carry as well in these spaces. And many of us are also first-generation college graduates. Some challenges that were expressed in an article from the Journal of Forestry, which was written by all those wonderful authors there. I am also on there. But some challenges that came out of the synthesis of natural resource students was that challenge in communicating and having others aware of our relationship to land and community as a motivation, the lack of faculty and mentors in tribal issues, as well as insufficient instruction in traditional ecological knowledge, as well as tribal law and policy and issues. And I just wanted to also highlight that as Native students in natural resources, there's an immense amount of pressure as well as a responsibility for us. And I mean, I guess I'm not a student anymore, so I shouldn't say that, but there was when I was a student. So just acknowledging that and making space for that, I think is really important. So some proposed solutions that we see here. So student support services. Again, having family services and financial aid. So this is just really like highlighting the diversity of experiences that tribal natural resource students have. So integrating the family, community, and work experience into the academic experience is a very successful approach. So that's been found, this particular quote, it cites 3 different articles. So that's at least 3 different studies that have proven that if we integrate those, that it increases the success. And we also need to be recruiting Native faculty and training for, need to be recruiting for Native faculty, but also training non-Native faculty and agency professionals to create a better environment for our natural resource students to I guess, study in. And then the last thing I'll mention on, I guess, these different support systems, or actually maybe a couple more slides, I'm not sure, but is cohorts. And so this participant in particular mentioned that what made the biggest difference for them throughout their entire college career was having the support from people, mentors, but even just at the friend level. So creating these cohorts for students, it could even be a cohort of entry-level tribal forestry professionals, or maybe it's a cohort of, if we're going through a hiring surge, mid-year professionals, or it's connecting across tribes, right? It doesn't have to be within just your program. That these cohorts, it really contributes to the success of the individual. These are some opportunities for partnership that I thought were worth noting. This particular participant mentioned that anecdotally there was a study that over 5 years at University of Idaho, they asked natural resource students, or the university asked natural resource students if they would consider working for a tribe. At the start of their academic career, they said no. There were 0 out of 300. After 5 years, which is going through their education at University of Idaho, 75 said that they would. So there's this increasing interest from non-Native students to work with tribes, and that's something perhaps in a future study to explore what that means. Another educational opportunity for partnership is building those relationships. So going back to the leadership strategies and mentorship strategies that I mentioned. So carving out that time to build and expose different university students to our forestry practices. It can provide them with a better understanding of the role that tribal forestry vision and culture, or tribal vision and culture plays in guiding our forest management practices. And what that is doing, right, is that's integrating those trainings that we were talking about to non-Native faculty. It's helping create and improve the environment for our tribal natural resource students by doing this. And again, this is just citing an example of how non-Native students have an increasing interest to work for tribes. This particular participant mentioned that they had taken a cohort of graduate students from Northern Arizona University to White Mountain and San Carlos, and this was the first time that many non-Native students in forestry had ever been to a reservation. It was the first time that many of them had learned about tribal forestry practices, and again, I think this is increasing that awareness also helps build that better environment for Native students. The last opportunity I'll mention is this data here. So 78% of K through 12 American Indian students live off of the reservation. So in a future study, I think it would be strategic for us to explore what that means and how do we connect these 78% of K through 12 students to opportunities in tribal forestry on reservations, on our, within our tribal forestry programs. What does that look like? What sort of education materials are available to them? And how can we, build relationships up with the school districts so that way, we could maybe expose these students a little earlier on than college to different forestry programs. So this particular section on partnership actually talks about turnover a lot. And the reason why I'm focusing on turnover here is that turnover affects our ability to partner effectively with government agencies, as well as with neighboring tribes, universities, and other organizations. So the turnover both within and within tribal forestry programs and these other agencies affects our authentic partnerships, and it also contributes to our lack of communication between each other. It also creates this burnout. So this particular quote, it it kind of gets at what I've seen what I've heard multiple times through these interviews is what happens is one person gets drawn away because somebody resigned, and so that person now has 2 jobs that they're responsible for. And so when that person tries to come back to their original job, they're overwhelmed by the amount of backlog that they have from their current work. They get so overwhelmed that they resign. And so just recognizing that burnout and fatigue, I don't have a solution, but I have some strategies that I found from some papers which I'm going to share with you. So to prepare for turnover, as leaders, identify future potential leaders and cultivate to build that leadership pipeline. We want to plan overlap between individuals, create onboarding and mentoring programs, build a culture of collaboration. So what that means is not just externally with external partners, but within your own team, collaborating on different planning activities, goal setting or forestry outreach activities too. And then also the tangible thing that I think we could do right now today, if we wanted to, is using transition memos. So those transition memos, what that does is provide institutional memory to bridge gaps in personnel. I just saw that, okay. We're gonna slide right through here. So we're gonna skip over these, but this is around building authentic relationships. These are recommendations for future partnership opportunities. If you want to partner with external organizations, it could be EcoTrusted, could be any of the number of organizations that are here today, partner with those who have access or can build access to cashless gear for training, and provide some additional capacity, so that way you can offload some of that stress of having one person do 2, 3, 4 jobs at a time. And let's see here. Okay, I know I have 2 minutes left here. Don't have too much time here, but so I'm just gonna leave you with, we spend so much time talking about our challenges, our barriers, what's going wrong, and I wanted to ask a question in these interviews was if those challenges and barriers were gone, what is it that we want? So what do we want a dream workforce development program to look like? And so the next few slides have some examples. Some themes that came out of it were around having experienced professionals guide and facilitate the training. Participants are self-selected and motivated. That we have local educators. So we can bring in people from, far away, but bolstering our local economy, compensating and paying people for their knowledge and time and effort. Also what came up was applied forestry curriculum, so actually get outside and doing things. I know we all don't learn the same way. Me lecturing up here to y'all, that may work for some people. If I had it my way, we'd be outside, getting our hands dirty, walking in the forest, out in the sunshine. But yeah, so just really thinking about the different ways that people learn. And the last thing that I'll say is creating hubs of a learning, so having hubs of learning and experience and training across our regions. So maybe we have, a group in Alaska come down to Oregon or Washington or, into Arizona or to Maine, and maybe we all come up here, which is what we're doing right now. But that is it. I don't think I have time for questions, but come find me. I'm happy to talk more about this, and this is just the surface too. So thank you so much for your time. Have a great lunch.